Ambassador Park Min-soo stood in the center of the massive chamber and felt very small. The walls reached up so high he could not see the ceiling in the dim light. Around him sat 12 enormous beings that looked nothing like humans. Some had too many arms, others had scales instead of skin, and one seemed to be made of living crystal that sparkled when it moved. This was the Galactic Court on Nexus Prime, and Park Min-soo was the first human to ever stand here. His hands were sweating inside his formal diplomatic gloves, and his heart was beating too fast. He had studied every alien language and custom he could find, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The being in the center chair was called Chancellor Korth and belonged to a race called the Valians. Korth had blue skin that seemed to glow, and eyes that were completely black. When Korth spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. Human Representative Park Min-soo, you stand accused of serious crimes against galactic law, Korth announced, and his words made the air vibrate. Your species has violated 3 fundamental laws that have kept peace in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Park Min-soo bowed his head respectfully as he had been taught. Your Honor, I come here seeking understanding and peace between humanity and the galactic community, he said in his most diplomatic voice. We are a young species and we did not know these laws existed. A terrible sound filled the chamber and Park Min-soo realized it was laughter. The aliens were laughing at him. The sound was harsh and cold and made his skin crawl. Ignorance is not an excuse, said another voice. This came from High Magistrate Veltaran, who looked like a giant insect with too many legs and eyes that glowed red. Your species has expanded into 3 star systems without permission. You have interfered with primitive species on 17 worlds. Most serious of all, you have built military bases in restricted space. Park Min-soo felt his stomach drop. These were exactly the charges he had feared. Earth's government had sent him here hoping to negotiate, but the aliens seemed to have already decided humanity was guilty. Your Honor, we can make reparations for any harm we have caused, Park Min-soo said quickly. Humanity wishes only to be good neighbors in the galaxy. We offer to pay compensation and to follow all galactic laws from now on. Good neighbors, repeated a third alien voice with obvious disgust. This one belonged to Prime Overseer Cax-Thul of something called the Hegemony. Cax-Thul had gray skin covered in scars and wore armor that looked like it was made from the bones of dead creatures. Your species builds weapons that could destroy entire planets, and you call yourselves good neighbors. Those weapons are only for defense, Park Min-soo protested. We built them because we detected hostile ships near our colonies. We were afraid, and we acted to protect ourselves. Fear, said Chancellor Korth, and the word dripped with contempt. Fear is what makes species dangerous. Fear is what makes them unpredictable. Your species has proven that humans cannot be trusted with advanced technology or freedom of movement in civilized space. Park Min-soo felt panic rising in his chest. This was going much worse than anyone on Earth had expected. The aliens were not interested in negotiation or compromise. They seemed to have already decided that humanity was a threat that needed to be controlled. What do you require of us? He asked quietly. Submission, said Veltaran simply. Complete and total submission to galactic authority. Your military will be disbanded. Your colonies will be abandoned. Your homeworld will be placed under direct galactic supervision. Human movement between star systems will be restricted and monitored. This is the price of your crimes. The chamber fell silent, except for the quiet humming of alien technology. Park Min-soo stared at the 12 judges and realized that everything Earth had feared was coming true. Humanity had reached for the stars, only to find masters waiting there. I must consult with my government, he said finally. This decision is too important for one person to make. There is nothing to consult about, said Cax-Thul harshly. The decision has been made. You will submit, or your species will be classified as a galactic threat and dealt with accordingly. Park Min-soo was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout the station. The aliens looked around in confusion as lights flashed and their own voices could be heard speaking urgently in languages he did not understand. A younger alien rushed into the chamber and approached Chancellor Korth. It whispered something that made Korth's glowing skin change to a darker blue. The Chancellor stood up slowly, and his black eyes seemed to grow even darker. "It appears," Korth said in a voice that was very quiet, but somehow more frightening than his earlier shouting, "that your species has brought warships to this system." Park Min-soo felt his blood turn to ice. "That is impossible, Your Honor," he said, quickly. "I came here alone on a diplomatic vessel. Earth would never send military ships to a peace negotiation. Our sensors detect 57 human warships holding position at the edge of this system," said Veltaran. "They are heavily armed and their weapons are powered. This is an act of war." "No," Park Min-soo said desperately. "There must be some mistake. Please let me contact my ship. I can explain this misunderstanding." But before anyone could respond, another alien entered the chamber carrying what looked like a communication device. It approached Korth and spoke quietly. Whatever it said made all 12 judges lean forward in their chairs. "The human ships are requesting permission to dock," Korth announced. "They say they carry a passenger who demands to address this court under Article 7 of the Galactic Justice Code." Park Min-soo had never heard of Article 7. He had studied galactic law for months preparing for this mission, but there were thousands of articles and codes that even Earth's best legal experts did not fully understand. "Article 7 has not been invoked in over 1,000 years, said another judge whose name Park Min-soo did not know. "It requires the presence of a planetary leader in matters of existential importance to their species." "Impossible," said Caxathul, standing up so quickly his armor clanked. "Primitive species do not bring their leaders to court proceedings. It is dangerous and foolish." "Nevertheless, the law is clear," said Chancellor Korth, though he did not sound happy about it. "If a planetary leader requests to address this court under Article 7, we must allow it. Prepare to receive the human delegation." Park Min-soo stood in the center of the chamber, feeling more confused than ever. Who could be coming? The President of Earth was supposed to be in meetings with the Asian Federation this week. The Secretary General of the United Nations was at a climate conference. Who had Earth sent that was important enough to invoke ancient galactic law? The massive doors at the front of the chamber began to open with a sound like grinding stone. Park Min-soo turned to watch and felt his heart stop beating for just a moment. Walking through those doors with calm confidence was President Kim Tae-ho himself. President Kim Tae-ho walked into the galactic court chamber like he owned the place. Park Min-soo had never seen his president look so calm and confident. Behind Tae-ho walked 6 other humans in dark suits. Park Min-soo recognized Colonel Lee, Woo Jin from the military briefings, and Dr. Yoon Sora from the legal preparation meetings, but he did not know the others. The aliens were clearly confused. Their heads turned to follow the human procession, and Park Min-soo could hear them whispering to each other in their strange languages. No species had ever brought their planetary leader to the galactic court. It simply was not done. Chancellor. Korth remained standing, and his blue skin was now glowing much brighter than before. "I am Chancellor Korth of the Galactic Court," he announced in his booming voice. "You claim to be a planetary leader. I am President Kim Tae-ho of Earth." Tae-ho replied in perfect galactic standard language. His voice was much quieter than Korth's, but somehow it carried just as well through the chamber. "I have come to address the charges against my species under Article 7 of the Galactic Justice Code." "This is highly irregular," said High Magistrate Veltaran. His insect-like head moved from side to side as he studied the human delegation. "Planetary leaders do not involve themselves in court proceedings. It is too dangerous and serves no purpose." Tae-ho smiled, and the expression was friendly, but somehow made Park Min-soo feel nervous. "Your Honor, Article 7 exists specifically to allow planetary leaders to represent their species in matters of existential importance," he said. "Since this court has just threatened to place my homeworld under alien occupation, I believe this qualifies as existentially important." Prime Overseer Caxthul stood up, and his bone armor rattled as he moved. "Your species sent warships to intimidate this court," he snarled. "This is an act of aggression that proves humans are too dangerous to be allowed freedom." "My ships are here to ensure my safe return to Earth," Tae-ho replied calmly. "Surely you cannot object to a planetary leader taking reasonable security precautions when visiting a foreign court that has already declared hostile intentions toward his species." The 12 judges looked at each other, and Park Min-soo could see they were having some kind of silent conversation. Several of them seemed angry, while others appeared confused or even worried. "Very well," Chancellor Korth said finally. "You may address the court under Article 7, but this changes nothing. Your species has violated galactic law and must face the consequences." "Thank you, Your Honor," Tae-ho said with another smile. He gestured to Dr. Yoon Sora, who stepped forward carrying a large briefcase. "Before we discuss consequences, however, I believe we should establish exactly what laws my species has supposedly violated." Dr. Yoon Sora opened her briefcase and removed what looked like a small computer tablet. She touched its surface, and suddenly, the air above it filled with words and numbers that glowed like holograms. "The first charge," she said in a clear professional voice, "is unauthorized expansion into 3 star systems. The court claims humanity violated the Colonization Control Act by establishing settlements without proper permits." "That is correct," said Veltaran. "The Rigelian system, the Wolf system, and the Centauri system were all colonized by humans without Galactic Authority approval, I see," said Dr. Yoon Sora. She touched her tablet again, and new information appeared in the air. According to the Galactic Registry, these 3 systems were classified as uninhabited and unclaimed for the past 800 years. The previous inhabitants, the Catherian Empire, was declared extinct after the Great Plague of 2847. Under Section 12 of the Colonization Control Act, any system unclaimed for more than 500 years becomes available for free colonization by any species. The chamber became very quiet. Park Min-soo watched the alien judges and saw several of them lean forward in their chairs to study the glowing words above Dr. Yoon Sora's tablet. "The Catherians were a member species," said Korth, but his voice sounded less certain than before. "Their territory remains under court protection. The Galactic Registry shows no active protection orders for former Catherian space," Dr. Yoon Sora replied. "In fact, the court officially declared all Catherian territory abandoned and available for resettlement in 2851. I have the documentation here if you would like to review it." Caxthul made a sound like grinding metal. "Legal technicalities do not change the fact that humans are expanding too rapidly and aggressively. The expansion rate of human colonies is well within the limits established by the Safe Development Standards," Colonel Lee Woo-jin said, stepping forward. His military bearing was obvious, and several aliens shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. "We have established 17 colonies over the past 30 years. The hegemony established 43 colonies in the same period. The hegemony is an established galactic power," Veltaran protested. "We have the resources and experience to manage rapid expansion safely." "Do you?" asked President Tae-ho, and there was something dangerous in his quiet voice. "Colonel Lee, perhaps you could share what our surveys found in former hegemony colonies." Colonel Lee touched his own tablet, and new images filled the air. Park Min-soo felt sick as he saw pictures of destroyed cities and empty planets covered in strange scars. "These are images from 12 former hegemony colonies," Lee said in a flat military tone. "All were abandoned within 5 years of establishment. Environmental damage suggests strip mining operations and toxic waste dumping. Several planets show evidence of forced labor camps. Those colonies were economically unfeasible," Caxthul said quickly, but his scarred face had changed color. "We followed proper procedures for colony abandonment." "Proper procedures that apparently include leaving behind mass graves," Dr. Yoon Sora said coldly. She touched her tablet, and even worse, images appeared. Park Min-soo had to look away. Chancellor. Korth raised one of his many hands, and the images vanished. "Enough," he said. "These accusations against the hegemony are not relevant to human crimes. They are relevant to the question of who is qualified to judge colonial management," President Tae-ho said. He was still smiling, but now the expression looked more like a wolf showing its teeth. "The second charge against humanity is violation of the non-interference doctrine. I believe we should examine that claim as well." Dr. Yoon Sora brought up new documents. "The court accuses humanity of interfering with primitive species on 17 worlds," she said. "However, our records show that in all 17 cases human intervention occurred during natural disasters or medical emergencies that threatened to destroy entire civilizations." The non-interference doctrine forbids all contact with pre-spaceflight species, said another alien judge whose name, Park Min-soo, had not learned. The reasons for contact are irrelevant. Actually, said Dr. Yoon Sora with a smile that was almost as dangerous as President Tae-ho's, the non-interference doctrine includes specific exceptions for humanitarian intervention during existential emergencies. Section 47 clearly states that any spacefaring species may provide disaster relief to primitive worlds if failure to act would result in extinction-level casualties. She touched her tablet again, and legal text filled the air above their heads. Furthermore, the doctrine requires that any species providing such aid must report their actions to the Galactic Court within 6 months and provide full documentation of their intervention. Humans have provided no such reports, Veltaran said. All 17 reports were filed properly and on time, Colonel Lee said. He produced his own tablet and more documents appeared. We have confirmation receipts from the court's own filing system. Every intervention was documented and justified according to galactic law. The chamber fell silent again. Park Min-soo looked around at the alien judges and realized they were starting to look worried. Their confident accusations were falling apart under careful human preparation and legal expertise. The third charge, President Tae-ho said into the silence, concerns our military installations. I believe we should address that as well. But before Dr. Yoon Sora could speak, Prime Overseer Cax Thul stood up again. His bone armor was rattling, and his scarred face was dark with anger. Enough of these legal games, he snarled. Laws can be interpreted many ways, but the truth is simple. Humans are dangerous. They build weapons that can destroy worlds. They expand faster than any species in galactic history. They interfere wherever they choose and use law as an excuse. The Galactic Court exists to prevent species like this from threatening civilized space. President Tae-ho stopped smiling. When he spoke, his voice was still quiet, but now it carried an edge that made Park Min-soo's skin crawl. Overseer Cax Thul, you have just said something very interesting, Tae-ho said. You admit that you interpret galactic law to serve your own purposes rather than seeking justice. You reveal that this court exists not to uphold law but to control species you consider dangerous. He looked up at Chancellor Korth, and when their eyes met, Park Min-soo saw something pass between them that made the alien leader step backward. Your Honor. President Tae-ho continued, I formally invoke Article 23 of the Galactic Justice Code. Humanity challenges the fundamental authority of this court and demands trial by merit rather than prejudice. The chamber erupted in chaos as every alien began speaking at once. The alien voices rose like a storm in the chamber. Park Min-soo had never heard such chaos from the usually dignified Galactic Court. Some judges were shouting at each other in their own languages while others were frantically consulting what looked like legal databases. Chancellor Korth was trying to restore order, but even his booming voice was lost in the noise. President Tae-ho stood perfectly still in the center of it all. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he watched the alien panic with the calm expression of someone who had expected exactly this reaction. Dr. Yoon Sora and Colonel Lee stood beside him, equally composed, while the other human delegates formed a protective circle around their leader. Silence! Roared Chancellor Korth, and his voice was so loud that the chamber walls seemed to vibrate. Slowly, the other aliens stopped shouting and turned to face him. Korth's blue skin was now glowing, so brightly it hurt to look at directly. Article 23 has not been invoked in over 3,000 years, Korth said, and his voice was very carefully controlled. It is an ancient law from a more primitive time when disputes were settled through contests of strength rather than civilized. Legal process? The law remains valid, President Tae-ho replied calmly. I have studied your legal codes very carefully, Your Honor. Article 23 states that any species accused of crimes against galactic civilization may demand trial by merit if they believe the court is acting from prejudice rather than justice. High Magistrate Veltaran leaned forward in his chair. His red eyes were blazing with anger, and his insect-like mandibles clicked together rapidly. You dare accuse this court of prejudice, human, he hissed. We are the guardians of galactic law. We have maintained peace and order for 10,000 years. Have you? Asked Dr. Yoon Sora, stepping forward. She touched her tablet, and new information filled the air above their heads. According to the Galactic Historical Archive, this court has overseen 17 major wars, 43 genocides, and the complete destruction of 26 star systems in the past 3,000 years alone. Those events were regrettable, but necessary to maintain overall stability, said another judge whose species Park Min-soo did not recognize. Sometimes harsh measures must be taken to prevent greater disasters. Like placing entire species under permanent occupation, Colonel Lee said grimly. We have identified 47 species currently under so-called Galactic Authority supervision. Most have been under your control for centuries, with no clear path to independence. Prime Overseer Cax Thule stood up slowly, and his bone armor made horrible scraping sounds. Those species proved they could not govern themselves responsibly, he said. The court acted to prevent them from threatening others, or to prevent them from challenging your authority, President Tae-ho said quietly. Colonel Lee, would you please share what we learned about the Altarian people? Colonel Lee nodded and touched his tablet. Images of a beautiful blue-green world appeared in the air, followed by pictures of a graceful humanoid species with silver skin and large, dark eyes. The Altarians were placed under Galactic Authority supervision 800 years ago, Lee said in his flat military voice. The official reason was excessive military buildup that threatened regional stability. Our investigation found that the Altarians had developed a new type of faster-than-light drive that was 50% more efficient than existing technology. Dangerous technology in the wrong hands, Veltaran said quickly. Technology that would have broken the hegemony's monopoly on interstellar transportation, Dr. Yoon Sora corrected. Within 6 months of occupation, all Altarian research facilities were dismantled, and their scientists were relocated to hegemony worlds. The new drive technology was classified as too dangerous for general use. Yet somehow the hegemony's own ships began using very similar technology within 2 years, Colonel Lee added. A remarkable coincidence. The chamber was becoming very quiet. Again. Park Min-soo could see that several of the alien judges were looking uncomfortable. They kept glancing at each other as if trying to decide what to say. These accusations are irrelevant to the charges against humanity, Chancellor Korth said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Article 23, Trial by Merit, requires that you prove your species deserves the rights you claim. Very well, said President Tae-ho. What would constitute such proof in your opinion? Korth consulted with the other judges in rapid whispers that Park Min-soo could not understand. After several minutes of discussion, the Chancellor faced the humans again. Trial by Merit consists of 3 challenges, he announced. First, you must demonstrate superior understanding of the mathematical principles that govern galactic civilization. Second, you must prove that your ethical framework is compatible with galactic law. Third, you must show that your species possesses the wisdom necessary to govern itself and interact responsibly with others. We accept these challenges, Tae-ho said immediately. You cannot win, Caxthul said with satisfaction. These tests were designed by the greatest minds in galactic history. No primitive species has ever passed even one challenge, let alone all 3. Then you should have nothing to fear from letting us try, Dr. Yoon Sora said sweetly. Chancellor Korth gestured toward a section of the chamber that Park Min-soo had not noticed before. The wall there was covered with complex symbols and equations that seemed to glow and shift as he watched them. The first challenge is the mathematics of reality, Korth explained. These equations govern the fundamental forces that allow faster-than-light, travel-dimensional manipulation and energy conversion on galactic scales. You must not only solve them, but explain why they work and demonstrate practical applications. Dr. Yoon Sora walked toward the wall of equations while the aliens watched with obvious amusement. Several of them were making that harsh laughing sound. Again. Park Min-soo felt his heart sink as he looked at the incredibly complex mathematical formulas. Earth's greatest scientists would need months or years to understand such advanced concepts. Dr. Yoon Sora stood before the wall for less than 30 seconds. Then she began to speak. These equations are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of quantum mechanics, she said calmly. You assume that space-time is a fixed framework that must be bent or broken to achieve faster-than-light travel. Actually, Space-time is more like a fluid that can be redirected through proper resonance frequencies. She touched the wall, and the equations began to change. New symbols appeared while others vanished or rearranged themselves into different patterns. By treating gravitational fields as standing waves rather than static distortions, you can create interference patterns that effectively move space itself, Dr. Yoon Sora continued. The ship does not exceed light speed. Instead, the ship moves faster than light while maintaining normal internal physics. Park Min-soo watched in amazement as the alien judges leaned forward in their chairs. Several of them were frantically taking notes while others seemed to be running calculations on their own devices. Furthermore, Dr. Yoon Sora said, this approach eliminates the massive energy requirements of traditional faster-than-light drives. Instead of brute force manipulation of space-time, you use precise harmonic frequencies that require minimal power input. She stepped back from the wall and turned to face the judges. The equations now showed a completely different mathematical framework that somehow looked more elegant and logical than the original version. This is impossible, Veltaran whispered. Those equations took our greatest minds centuries to develop. Your greatest minds were approaching the problem incorrectly, Dr. Yoon Sora replied. Human mathematics is based on different philosophical foundations that lead to more efficient solutions. Chancellor Korth stared at the transformed equations for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was much quieter than before. You have passed the first challenge, he said reluctantly. But mathematical ability alone does not prove fitness for galactic citizenship. The second challenge concerns ethics and moral reasoning. Another section of the chamber lit up, revealing what looked like a complex three-dimensional maze made of light. Inside the maze were moving figures that Park Min-soo realized represented different alien species. This is the moral labyrinth, Korth explained. It presents ethical dilemmas that have no clear solutions. You must navigate through scenarios where any choice results in harm to someone, and find the path that causes the least suffering overall. President Tae-ho himself stepped forward to face this challenge. He studied the light maze for several minutes, while the aliens watched expectantly. This test is designed to fail, Tae-ho said finally. Every path through the maze requires accepting that some beings must suffer for the greater good. It assumes that harm is inevitable, and the best we can do is minimize it. That is the nature of leadership, Cax-Thul said smugly. Sometimes leaders must make terrible choices for the benefit of their people, no, Tae-ho said firmly. Sometimes leaders must reject the false choices presented to them and find a third option. He walked directly into the maze, but instead of following any of the predetermined paths, he began moving in ways that Park Min-soo did not understand. It looked like Tae-ho was somehow stepping outside the maze itself. The fundamental flaw in this test, Tae-ho called out as he moved, is that it assumes conflict is inevitable. The third section of the chamber activated with a sound like distant thunder. What appeared was not another test or puzzle, but something that made Park Min-soo's breath catch in his throat. The air itself seemed to become solid, and within it formed images of entire worlds and star systems. It was like looking at a miniature galaxy floating in space before them. The challenge of wisdom. Chancellor Korth announced, but his voice had lost much of its earlier authority. You must demonstrate that your species possesses the judgment necessary to govern not just yourselves, but to influence the fate of other civilizations. President Tae-ho studied the floating galaxy with calm interest while the alien judges watched him carefully. Park Min-soo could see that several of them were no longer looking confident. The first two challenges had shaken their assumptions about human capabilities. What exactly does this test require? Tae-ho asked. High Magistrate Veltaran gestured toward the miniature galaxy with one of his many arms. You will be presented with the actual governing decisions this court has faced over the past 1,000 years, he explained. Real situations involving real species and real consequences. You must show that you would make better choices than we did. And if we disagree with decisions you consider correct, Dr. Yoon Sora asked quietly, then you will prove that humans lack the wisdom to participate in galactic governance, Cax-Thul said with satisfaction. This test has never been passed by any species. The challenges are too complex, and the stakes too high for primitive minds to understand. President Tae-ho smiled that dangerous smile again. Then let us begin. The first scenario materialized around them like a living hologram. They stood in what looked like the council chambers of an alien world. The beings there were tall and thin, with green skin and large eyes that reminded Park Min-soo of Earth's dolphins. The Salandrians, Korth explained. 500 years ago, they developed weapons of mass destruction and began threatening their neighbors. The Galactic Court faced a choice: allow them to continue unchecked or intervene to protect innocent civilizations. In the hologram, Park Min-soo watched as Salandrian ships attacked peaceful trading vessels and destroyed entire colonies. The death toll climbed into millions as the scenario played out. "We chose to intervene," Veltarin said proudly. Salandrian military capabilities were eliminated and their government was placed under Galactic Authority supervision. The attacks stopped immediately. "And the Salandrian people?" Taeho asked quietly. The hologram shifted to show the current state of the Salandrian homeworld. Park Min-soo felt sick as he saw a planet covered in factories and mining operations. The elegant green-skinned beings now looked thin and tired as they worked under the supervision of alien overseers. "They learned to be productive members of galactic society," Caxthul said dismissively. "Their aggressive tendencies were channeled into useful labor. You turned them into slaves," Colonel Lee said flatly. "We prevented a war that could have killed billions," Korth replied angrily. "Sometimes harsh measures are necessary for the greater good." "There was another option," President Taeho said, studying the hologram carefully. "You could have addressed the root cause of Salandrian aggression instead of just suppressing its symptoms." "What?" "Root cause," Veltarin demanded. Taeho gestured, and somehow the hologram responded to his command. The scene shifted to show the Salandrian system from 500 years earlier. Park Min-soo could see that their homeworld was slowly dying as its star grew dimmer and cooler. The Salandrians were facing extinction, Taeho explained. Their sun was entering the final stages of its life cycle. They attacked other worlds because they desperately needed new colonies to save their species. Instead of helping them relocate, you destroyed their ability to help themselves. Relocation of an entire species requires enormous resources, Korth protested. The cost would have been astronomical. The cost of keeping them enslaved for 500 years has been much higher, Dr. Yoon Sora pointed out. Not to mention the moral cost of genocide through forced labor. The hologram shifted again, showing calculations that made several alien judges lean back in their chairs. The numbers clearly demonstrated that helping the Salandrians relocate would have cost far less than centuries of occupation and supervision. Furthermore, Taeho continued, a relocated Salandrian civilization would have become productive galactic citizens and valuable trading partners. Instead, you created a permanent drain on galactic resources and a source of instability. The second scenario began without warning. This time they stood on what looked like a massive space station orbiting a red giant star. The beings here were crystalline entities that communicated through patterns of light. The Zephyrians announced another alien judge whose name Park Min-soo had not learned. They claimed that organic life was inferior and began converting entire biospheres into crystal matrices. We were forced to stop them. The hologram showed crystal ships transforming living worlds into geometric patterns of mineral formations. Billions of organic beings died as their planets were restructured into alien art projects. We destroyed their conversion technology and banned them from approaching organic worlds, Veltarin said. The galaxy was saved from complete crystallization. And the Zephyrians themselves? Taeho asked. The scene shifted to show the current state of Zephyrian space. The crystal beings were confined to a small cluster of asteroids around their dying sun. Their light patterns were dim and erratic, like the communications of a species in despair. They were contained, Caxthul said. The threat was eliminated. Yudichu trapped a species of artists and philosophers in a cosmic prison, President Taeho said quietly. The Zephyrians were not trying to commit genocide. They were trying to create beauty according to their own aesthetic sense. Beauty that required destroying entire civilizations, Korth pointed out. Because no one ever taught them that organic beings were truly alive in the same way they were, Dr. Yoon Sora said. Crystalline intelligence experiences reality so differently from organic thought that they literally could not understand that they were committing murder. She touched her tablet, and new images filled the air. These showed what looked like crystalline gardens, where geometric patterns grew and changed in complex harmonies. "We have been studying Zephyrian art and philosophy," she continued. "They are capable of creating incredible beauty that enhances life rather than destroying it. But they needed education, not imprisonment. They needed to understand that organic consciousness is just as valid as crystalline consciousness," Colonel Lee added. "Instead of teaching them, you condemned them to slow extinction." The third scenario was the most disturbing yet. They found themselves in what looked like a war room filled with screens showing space battles. The combatants were two species that Park Min-soo recognized from his diplomatic training. "The Hegemony Valian War," Korth said grimly. 800 years ago, these two powers nearly destroyed each other in a conflict that threatened to destabilize the entire galaxy. We were forced to choose sides. The hologram showed massive fleets of ships destroying each other, while entire star systems burned in the crossfire. The death toll was beyond anything Park Min-soo could imagine. "We supported the hegemony," Caxthul said with obvious pride. "They were the stronger power and more likely to bring stability to the region." "You supported them because they promised to share the conquered Valian territory with the court," President Tae-ho said coldly. The alien judges looked shocked that he knew this detail. Caxthul's scarred face grew dark with anger. "The hegemony offered tribute in exchange for support," he admitted. "This was standard diplomatic procedure." "Standard corruption," Dr. Yoon Sora corrected. "You allowed billions of Valians to die so you could profit from their resources." The hologram showed the aftermath of the war. Valian worlds lay in ruins while hegemony occupation forces stripped them of anything valuable. Survivors were forced into labor camps or simply eliminated as inconvenient. "The war would have happened regardless of our involvement," Velteron protested. "At least our intervention ended it quickly." "Your intervention made it worse," Tae-ho replied. "Both species were exhausted and ready to negotiate peace. But your support encouraged the hegemony to continue fighting until they achieved total victory." He gestured, and the hologram shifted to show an alternate timeline where the war had ended in negotiated settlement rather than conquest. Both civilizations survived and even prospered through trade and cultural exchange. "The hegemony and Valians were natural partners," Colonel Lee explained. "Hegemony military strength combined with Valian technological innovation could have created one of the most powerful and stable alliances in galactic history. Instead, you helped create the current system where the hegemony rules through fear, while innovation stagnates under authoritarian control." The holograms faded and the chamber returned to normal lighting. The 12 alien judges sat in silence, studying the humans with expressions that ranged from shock to grudging respect to barely controlled rage. "You have shown alternative approaches," Chancellor Korth said finally, "but you have not proven that these approaches would actually work. In practice, it is easy to criticize decisions when you do not bear the responsibility for their consequences." President Tae-ho nodded slowly. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien eye was fixed on President Tae-ho as he stood in the center of the court with his hands clasped behind his back. Park Min-soo had never heard such absolute quiet in the massive space. Even the humming of alien technology seemed to have stopped. "What boundary?" Chancellor Korth asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "The boundary between civilization and tyranny," Tae-ho replied. "The line that separates justice from oppression. The difference between leaders who serve their people and rulers who exploit them for personal gain." He gestured to Dr. Yoon Sora, who touched her tablet. Suddenly, the air above them filled with images and documents that made several alien judges gasp in shock. "For the past 18 months, Tae-ho continued, humanity has been conducting a comprehensive investigation of galactic civilization. We wanted to understand the galaxy we were joining. What we found was not a court of justice, but a criminal organization that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia." The images showed world after world under alien occupation, species enslaved in their own star systems, entire civilizations wiped out when they became inconvenient to galactic powers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "These are internal security matters," Veltarin protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The court must sometimes make difficult decisions to maintain stability. Stability for whom? Colonel Lee asked, stepping forward. His military bearing was more obvious now, and Park Min-soo realized the colonel was no longer just an observer, but a representative of Earth's armed forces. Our investigation identified 47 species currently under illegal occupation, Lee continued. 133 civilizations completely destroyed by court-approved military action. Over 6 trillion sentient beings dead or enslaved in the name of galactic law. You have no right to investigate galactic affairs, Cax-Thul snarled. Your species lacks the authority and expertise to judge our actions. We have the right that every free being possesses, President Tae-ho said firmly. The right to distinguish between good and evil. The right to choose justice over expedience. The right to say no to tyrants. Dr. Yoon Sora touched her tablet again, and new images appeared. These showed something that made Park Min-soo's heart skip a beat. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy not as conquerors, but as liberators. At this moment, Tae-ho announced, Earth's fleet is taking position in 47 star systems. We are offering protection to any species that chooses to reject galactic tyranny and join a new alliance based on freedom and mutual respect. Impossible, Korth breathed. Your species has only been in space for decades. You cannot have built a fleet capable of challenging galactic powers. We did not build it alone, Colonel Lee said with obvious satisfaction. It turns out that many species have been waiting for someone to stand up to the galactic court. They were simply too afraid to act individually. The images showed fleets of ships from dozens of different species working together under human coordination. The Salandrians were there with vessels that looked like they were made from living crystal. The surviving Valians had contributed ships that seemed to bend space around them. Even some species that Park Min-soo had never heard of were represented in the growing alliance. You turned them against us, Veltarin accused. You poisoned their minds with lies and false promises. We offered them what you never did, Dr. Yoon Sora replied coldly. The truth about their own history and the choice to determine their own future. She showed communications from the liberated worlds, messages of gratitude and relief from beings who had lived under galactic oppression for centuries. Species that had forgotten what freedom felt like, now remembering what it meant to make their own decisions. This is rebellion, another alien judge shouted. This is chaos and anarchy. Without central authority, the galaxy will tear itself apart, in endless wars. The galaxy has been tearing itself apart under your authority for 10,000 years, President Tae-ho pointed out. At least now the fighting will be for freedom instead of slavery. He turned to address all 12 judges directly. Your system of government was built on a lie. You convinced species that they needed masters to protect them from each other. But the greatest threat to galactic peace has always been you. And what do you propose to replace us with? Chancellor Korth demanded. What gives humanity the right to restructure galactic civilization? We are not restructuring anything, Tae-ho said calmly. We are simply giving species the choice to leave your system if they wish. Those who want to remain under galactic court authority are free to do so. The Chamber's communication systems suddenly activated as messages began pouring in from across the galaxy. Park Min-soo watched in amazement as world after world announced their intention to leave the galactic court system and join the new Free Worlds Alliance. This will not stand, Cax-Thul roared, jumping to his feet. The hegemony has the largest fleet in the galaxy. We will destroy your rebellion and restore proper order. The hegemony fleet is currently surrounded and outnumbered 3-1 in every system they occupy, Colonel Lee informed him. Your ship commanders are being offered the choice to surrender peacefully or be destroyed where they stand. More messages flooded in showing hegemony commanders accepting terms of surrender rather than face the overwhelming force arrayed against them. The mighty galactic power that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was collapsing in a matter of hours. How Korth whispered. How did you coordinate all of this without us knowing? You made the same mistake that all tyrants make, President Tae-ho replied. You assumed that silence meant consent. You thought that because species obeyed your laws, they supported your system. You never realized that most of the galaxy was just waiting for someone to show them an alternative. Dr. Yoon Sora displayed the final piece of evidence. It was a treaty document signed by representatives from over 200 species formally, establishing the Free Worlds Alliance. The Alliance Charter is simple, she explained. Each member species governs itself according to its own laws and customs. No central authority can force any world to act against its will. Disputes between members are resolved through negotiation and arbitration, never through military force. That system will never work, Velteran protested. Different species have incompatible interests and values. Without strong central control, they will inevitably come into conflict, perhaps, Tejo admitted. But if the alliance fails, it will be because free beings chose to fight each other. That is still preferable to slavery disguised as peace. Chancellor Korth stood slowly, and his blue skin had faded to a dull gray color. You have destroyed 10,000 years of galactic order, he said quietly. You have condemned the galaxy to chaos and war. We have given the galaxy hope, President Tejo corrected. For the first time in millennia, species can choose their own destiny instead of having it chosen for them. He looked around the chamber one final time. The Galactic Court can continue to exist if it chooses. Any species that prefers your system of government is welcome to remain under your authority. But you no longer have the right to impose your will on those who choose freedom. The alien judges sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation became clear. Half the galaxy had already joined the alliance while the other half was in open revolt against their former masters. The age of galactic tyranny was ending. There is one more thing, Tejo said as he prepared to leave. Humanity extends an invitation to any member of this court who wishes to join the alliance as individuals. Your species may have supported tyranny, but that does not mean you personally cannot choose a different path. Several of the younger alien judges looked interested, but none dared to speak openly. Park Min-soo realized it would take time for them to overcome centuries of conditioning that had taught them to follow authority without question. President Tejo turned and walked toward the chamber doors, followed by his delegation. Park Min-soo fell in step beside his president, feeling proud and terrified in equal measure. Mr. President, he said quietly, what happens now? Now we find out if freedom really is better than slavery, Tejo replied. It will not be easy, Park Min-soo. Free beings make mistakes and sometimes choose poorly. The alliance will face challenges that the court never had to deal with. Do you think it will work? President Tejo paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the alien judges who sat frozen in their chairs like statues of a fallen empire. I think it has to work, he said finally, because the alternative is to become like them, and humanity would rather die free than live as slaves. As they walked through the corridors of the station toward their shuttle, Park Min-soo could hear the sounds of celebration echoing from hundreds of worlds. Species that had been silent for millennia were finally finding their voices. The galaxy would never be the same. Behind them, the Galactic Court sat in their empty chamber, trying to understand how their perfect system of control had crumbled in a single day. They had crossed the boundary, and humanity had made sure they could never cross back.